Hello, 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 and welcome to Innovation Culture Coding Live, where we deconstruct cases of large corporations, small corporations, individual people with innovation coaches and consultants. My name is Jens Heitland, and I'm the CEO of Heitland Innovation, which is a platform where we connect innovators. We connect them to knowledge, we connect them to each other, and we connect them to solve problems for you as the listeners. And of course, we do this and letting them shine as well, which is one of these vehicles, which is this show where I interview coaches and consultants to do that. Today's theme is disrupting the disruptors. How might a leading European bank grow its market share and remain competitive in the 21st century? And I have a very, very specific guest for this, and I will bring him on the screen right now. Hello, Bruno. How are you doing? Great to have you.
Hello, Jens. I'm doing great and so happy to be here. And I have to comment, I really loved your bombastic video opening. Very dramatic music.
Thank you. Yeah, we need to do a little bit of buzz to get people innovating. Good. So, before we go into the case, as usual, for everyone who is watching this, please let us know from where you watch this. It's always great to see something in the chat. And if you have questions, you're welcome to ask them in the questions as well. But Bruno, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what are you doing?
Mm-mm. Well, I will start with your invitation about where you're from. I will not put it into chat, I'll just say it out loud. I'm actually a Croatian, but I live and work primarily in Norway. And all the experience and advice and thinking that I'll be sharing today, I think that my background is useful to hear, at least so you know where I'm coming from. So I started as an engineer, industrial engineer to be more precise, in the defense industry. And I worked, on battle tanks, weapon system, trains, etc., etc., etc. And as I was doing that, I was working on some very, very challenging innovation projects of the size that they would influence GDP of several countries. So they were quite sizable projects. And what I learned there is about how to do innovation right and how to not do it right in many, many different ways. But for me, that was a triggering point to start questioning, okay, innovation obviously isn't just about technical side, just about product. There's about marketing, human side, how do we interact? And then it's been almost 10 years. I've been traveling the world, working with large companies, working with entrepreneurs as well, trying to figure out, well, how can they innovate better?
Yeah.
That's at a high level. I'm a curious guy. I do a lot of different things, but maybe what people usually are, I wouldn't say surprised, but they have question mark is martial arts. I've been doing martial arts ever since I was a little kid, and then people often ask me like, how does that tie into things you do? But maybe that's for another conversation.
That's awesome. So, before we go into the case, little shout out to where everyone who is watching or listening to it later can find the show notes and as well later on video clips, the video version and the audio version. Go to heitlandinnovation.com/innovation culture coding and you will find all the different interviews I have done or live shows I have done around this. And of course, very important today, Bruno's profile is already up there. Have a look and you will as well have the possibility to reach out to him through this website. Bruno, let's go into the case.
Let's do
Yes.
it.
Disrupting the disruptors is always interesting, and of course specifically when it goes around money, which is the banking industry. So the case, a leading European banks have been hit on multiple fronts, from changes in customer expectations and behaviors to driven by fintech to new market entrants and much much more. So there are a lot of things how banks are effective. So one specific bank, and they're one of the leading European banks, they look into reinventing themselves, and what better to do is asking Bruno for help. So they reach out to you, and that's the starting point. Everything else we need to define, everything else we need to figure out. So let's say there's the management team of a leading bank. They're calling you and say, Bruno, we want to reinvent ourselves. How would you start, even like just from that call on?
Mm, mm, mm. Well, I think how I would start, one thing first is to confirm that there is actually no burning platform. It's a myth in the financial industry. And let me explain on that. So often when we talk about transformation, change, innovation, or implementing new ways of working like agile or whatever, people go for burning platform as an argument. The thing is, in the financial industry, they've been threatened and scared or try to be feared into submission. Fintechs are coming, regulations are coming, PSD2 is coming, GDPR is coming, quick, change, or you will be ruined. That hasn't happened. PayPal started in 2008 and built a massive business, but it's not like they replaced banking. There's a lot of smaller startups that came, earned a lot of money, started building neobanks, transactional services, look at TransferWise, Robinhood, N26, etc. All different competitors biting at different parts of the financial market, but they didn't succeed in really disrupting and replacing major financial institutions. So the moment when the management team would approach me, I would immediately tell them that's a bad argument. If you go to your shareholders and tell them, oh, it's panic, so many competitors, we must invest in innovation, they would say no. Why? Because if you look historically, unfortunately, large companies, incumbents, the money they put in innovation most often leads to value destruction, not value creation. And I'm all about profitable innovation, like you are. I'm sure. I mean, nobody would want to innovate and get nothing out of it, at least not for corporate innovation. And why I would start with that is it's so difficult in large companies, especially financial institutions that have additional regulation, additional internal audits. If you start from the bad argument, you're immediately on a thin ice and you will basically not get the green light and approval unless you're new CEO and has such backing from all your shareholders. But if that happens, you have much bigger problems. That means that someone new was brought in to basically reinvent the whole bank from ground up. And that is completely different case. Does that make sense to you? Does that resonate with your experience?
So you go in, you tell them, okay, guys, I understand where you come from. There's a lot of pressure on you, but you so that you don't believe that there's a burning platform. Let's have a conversation around that. So then they understand your point of view. They still want to work with you, hopefully after that, which I guess, because honesty is a very, very powerful tool, specifically early on in conversation, because let's say there's no contract yet. So they want to engage with you. They have seen what you have done and believe that you can help them. So how would you then? So they agree, okay, let's figure this out. So how could you help them? What is the next step for you? How would you engage?
So what usually happens in my experience so far is the person inviting someone to help out with this innovation thing is usually a bit more forward thinking person. So this argument and recognition that there's no burning platform is actually for the skeptics on the management team. Because they will be mostly like this, they told us fintechs will disrupt us. Well, that hasn't happened. Look at our P&L. So by acknowledging that, they start opening their hands and they're like, yeah, okay, this people gets it, this guy gets it. And then we actually start looking at the important things. So I mentioned that most of the investments in innovation in incumbent companies lead to value destruction. So from that acceptance that, hey, burning platform isn't really the reality, but that doesn't mean there's no opportunity out there. So what we're really looking at is securing part of the budget in order to basically increase revenues. So let's start from there. It's a very simple argument. And then there are a few things. Every bank will try to protect their assets. It's basically what banking is about. You have asset, you protect the asset, you must have certain amount of asset in order to be allowed to issue credits, be it consumer loans, be it corporate loans, whatever. So they understand this way of thinking. This approach to innovation is all about asset protection. So how do you do that? First, never issue money to ideas that are not aligned with strategy. This sounds so obvious, but it's so I don't want to drop names, but I cannot tell you how many times I've looked over a project or have been brought on for a project, and I would ask him, okay, cool, your idea sounds cool. Who am I to judge? I'm not the bankman,
Yeah.
How does that relate to what the bank wants to do? And then people start scratching their head. That's your first filter. So
Yeah.
even if your strategy is imperfect, it's still your strategy. If it's imperfect, then make it better. But at the moment you have it, use it as a filter. So
Yeah.
if people
Yeah.
come forward with ideas, if it doesn't pass the align with strategy filter, don't allow people to work on it. Don't issue any money. So that is first thing practically you can immediately apply to protect the asset. Then the second one, let's say that the idea passes through your strategic filter. Don't invest in orphan ideas. That's something we learned from the VC world and entrepreneurship. Team matters more than the idea. Or to be more specific, quality of the team matters more than the quality of the idea. So
Yeah.
if you're serious about protecting the asset, you will never fund an idea that doesn't have a specific group of people assigned to it. So if an executive has a brilliant idea but tells, Jens and Bruno go execute on it, we could do something about it. But at any given time, if it becomes too difficult or people are giving us too much, I censor that, we might just say, okay, cool. I mean, this is your idea. I did my best.
Yeah.
Everybody is blocking all the time. Why should I spend 3 years of my life, developing something that people give me a hard time about? And that often happens in financial institutions. So someone will say, we should digitize. Let's hire a guy and team to digitize. And then they bring them on and everybody gives them a hard time. And those people eventually leave the company. They don't complete the transformation.
Yeah.
So this was a bit of a detour. But basically, protect the asset by filtering and then never funding an idea that doesn't have clear accountability and ownership. And the third one, which is often forgotten, again, banks, like all the other incumbent companies, they usually plan in financial cycles. So they assign budgets. Now, there's a little bit of a paradox. They should assign a proper innovation budget in hundreds of millions of euros, but they should not release it at once.
Yeah.
Again, without dropping names, that is a common mistake. So there is a massive innovation budget, and then CEO likes one idea or someone pitches an idea very well to him, and the CEO is like, all in, let's go all in on that idea. And you and I know that innovation is numbers game. If you go on one idea, only one thing can happen. You will lose money, no
Yeah.
matter how good this idea will be, because you will not build a unicorn in one investment. So in order to continue protecting the assets, budget should be defined in advance, a sizable budget, but it should be released in tranches. And that is something, again, that financial people understand really well when you make connection to them. And then they get it. I'm actually just releasing part of that. So then we go into option theory, either real option, traditional options, whatever they're familiar with, because then they have an option to invest in developing idea. And then then we start completing the story. Then we go from innovation is something risky to innovation is something that I have option to invest in with real levers to protect the asset.
Yeah.
If I'm able to protect the asset, then I can go back to my shareholders and ask them for permission. Hey, I know we are a traditional bank, but we have some cool things that we want to invest in, and here are all the measures that we have in
Yeah.
order to protect your money. And now we start moving into space where we can actually start innovating. Did that make sense, or was it?
Absolutely. I like this way of thinking. So really starting from, hey, there's no burning platform, just to bring it back for those who just jumped in and started to listening. It's no burning platform right now. They need to understand then going into it to understand, hey, it's all about securing the assets, building a budget that fits to the strategy. That's filter number one. So don't go for ideas that are not supporting the strategy direction. Building the budget as a part of that, then that of course is sizable, as you said, but then only release it in tranches, not going all in the beginning. And it's really important, you mentioned as well, that it's not about the idea only, it's also that you have a specific team allocated to it, that they have the accountability and the ownership of it. Love that, because I mean that's valid for every organization. It's not just banks. And specifically, as soon as you talk with the financial people or controllers in a large organization, they're happy if they get this understanding from the beginning, and not just, hey, these are the innovators, these are the wild guys. They just go and prototype or do design thinking or whatever fancy words we have out there.
Yeah.
It's a business, and that's,
Ex-
I think, the most important part. Innovation is a, a tool that helps you to build business and do things with your business.
yeah. And it is very important because, again, what we say, of course, makes logic to any large company out there. I mean, even smaller companies. What banks and financial institutions are different is they need to adhere to their processes in most of the time,
Yeah.
because if you're talking about a large financial institution, if something goes wrong, it can influence the livelihood of many people. So they are a bit more limited. And when we reframe things like we did a moment ago, then we turn controllers from the bad guys to actually being part of the innovation process. We turn internal audit into being people that can actually contribute to innovation as well. And that is so important for innovation in large banks, because, I mean, it's difficult to move stuff inside. You need to get a lot of permissions, green lights, thumbs up, etc. It's really not move fast and break things, because if you break something and people lose their pension or don't get their salaries, that's really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, cool. So I would like to dig deeper into this before we go on. So you start with, then you have the conversation around the platforms, and then you go into the strategy filter.
Mm.
How do you get them to that point? I mean, you go from a conversation into, okay, they hire you to support them, let's say, with a contract over 2 years. How do you get them towards that? Do they set up a project team or whatever before, or do you need someone who is responsible for the innovation part of it, or how do you see that in the beginning?
Well, I guess now the more I talk to you, I guess I really have some sort of controversial approach. So I start by saying this doesn't exist. We need to protect the asset. And then the third thing, again, where I focus is, in my view, innovation is about creating value, both for the customer, but also for the company itself. Therefore, I actually propose not to start with innovation team or something like that. I usually propose, let's find the business unit. We must start with someone that has profit and loss responsibility.
Yeah.
Support functions are important. Of course, if you're a big company, you will have a service design unit or innovation unit, something like that, that will probably a shared service unit similar to IT or something else. But they shouldn't, in my opinion and experience, be the one driving this or even delivering on this. They should be supporting support units. It is in business units that have P&L responsibility where we want to start with our innovation story. And then again, what I propose, continuing on on the string of arguments, is big bang transformations are just big waste. Open heart surgery for a financial institution is make or break investment.
Yeah.
There is no reason to take such approach with innovation. Taking that approach makes sense only if there was massive change in governmental regulations, and suddenly, the way you were handling maybe financial data is illegal, and you must change that by specific deadline, or the country will close you. Then it makes sense. Let's be real. That's not the story with innovation. You want to come up with new consumer product, with new corporate product, you will not perish if you don't do that. So it's important to accept, hey, forget about these big bang transformations. What it happens is, it mobilizes everybody, but nothing comes out of it. And even worse, usually such approaches are very front heavy. So you will have these big conferences, you will be bringing speakers about innovation, you will have these creative workshops, etc. You will try to mandate it, so suddenly people will be forced to attend these courses, webinars, classes, and you will only create animosity. And even worse, those that actually will participate, and they will provide you with ideas, because you so front loaded it, you will not be able to do anything with those ideas. What will happen is people will give their ideas, they won't hear anything back, and then next time you do that, they will not
Nobody's, yeah.
participate. Exactly. Why would they? So that's why I say forget about big bang transformation for innovation. Let's look at something what I call innovation vanguard. So vanguard, from military terminology, vanguard is a special unit that's ahead of the main force. Their job is both to explore, investigate, soften up anything they encounter, and then rejoin main force. Now, I don't like business as war metaphor, but why I like vanguard is for the following reason. If you look at the business unit, and let's say a few thousand people, of course you will not try to transform the whole business unit, but take a vertical slice. And this is really critical. This is continuing to the story of protecting the asset. You cannot innovate bottom up or top down. You need to have a whole vertical slice. What I mean by that, you need few people from top management, few people from middle management, and few teams from the front line.
Yeah.
They together form a beginning of your innovation system. They're testing the market, they're testing the ideas, but they're also testing the way of work. And because of the way psychology works, when you see your peers doing something and benefiting from it, then you want to try it out as well. And that's why it's also important to have, people from the top management, because I don't know, 3 out of 9 will be part of the innovation vanguard. So the other 6 will be watching what's happening.
Yeah.
Are they actually getting the results they need to get? Is it making, good impact on their bonuses? Is it making good impact on their employees, etc.? We need to be realistic. We cannot forget that, success is tied to people's salaries, compensation, and performance. So we need to account for that. The same goes then for middle management. Like, people give a lot of flack to middle management, especially in the financial institutions. But it's not their fault that they're between the hammer and the hard place. They do their best. But we need to provide them the tools. And the same goes for the front line. Frontline respects other people from the front line. They consider, executives, that's like completely different language. Forget about them. It's about us. So again, it matters more that they see their peers doing that. It's not another story from the management. It's not another group of fancy consultants doing their consulting work. But hey, this is actually real. Yeah. And then when you have that vertical slice, then we can start doing some magic. And I'll take a small pause here because I need to take a sip of water.
Yeah,
and
no,
to check in
good.
with you if that's
super. So I love that, because I've seen it so often in organization failing, that they start with the theory, try to educate everyone, and it's not going to work because they haven't seen the success themselves. So to go into that and digging a little deeper. So you said a business unit, and from there, then taking one vertical slice, which like one team, which is going into that. Would you then work in a way that, hey, you have, I don't know, let's say 20 business units, and you would ask them, or the CEO, the management would ask them, hey, is anyone who is willing to do that, or is there more decision power in that?
So that would really depend on the business itself. So for example, even really large companies don't often have that many business units, because the trend was over last decade, the trend was basically simplifying the organizations. What usually happened is several business units slammed into one on paper, but organizationally you would still have old power blocks.
Yeah.
Where I would start is, well, let's go back from the corporate strategy. So what is your goal? And then we can either look at most promising or most problematic business unit. So it shouldn't be someone in the middle. Either, there is something where there's a lot of opportunity, be it because market is changing, or be it because of some sort of underperformance. Yeah. So I would suggest starting with one of those two. Third thing to consider is, whatever is the person leading that needs to be highly respected across the organization.
Yeah.
What I say, the champion doesn't need to know anything about innovation. He or she just shouldn't hate innovation. That's it.
That helps.
And exactly. So no hate, but in terms of love or understanding, not important. What's important is that when someone drops their name, people open their calendars.
Yes.
And that's a reality in big organizations, because so much time is wasted. Like, hey, we want to move fast. Oh, but we can't get a meeting for 2 months. Oh, and
Yeah.
then suddenly we have 2 month wait time. Horrible. That's why you need a proper champion at the top. Again, big name. When we move more into it, so you mentioned the team. What I would clarify is, what I like to say is, innovators innovate, managers manage, executives fund. So everybody in that vertical slice has different job to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So executives, what they need to develop in terms of skills is, how do we evaluate proposals, ideas, and decide if we should or shouldn't give part of the budget in the tranches, as we discussed before.
Yeah.
Managers, they need to develop skills in managing innovation. How do we assemble teams? How do we connect objectives with strategy? How do I communicate and translate between the management and the front line? How do I measure innovation? How do I ensure that the teams get proper support?
Mm.
Because there's nothing as wasteful as allowing the team to, oh yeah, great idea, go innovate, and then give them no resources, no access to internal people. It's like, hey, I need to talk with legal. Yeah, sure, they're gonna internally bill you, and again, because you're not priority, maybe in 3 months. But I need an answer now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is innovation manager's job. And then finally, the front line, what I say, innovators innovate. It's all about the skills that people most often talk about when they talk about innovation: design thinking, lean startup, outcome driven innovation,
Yeah.
pick your
Yeah.
innovation approach. But that's, I don't want to say that's least important, but that is, practice is important, but that is about, if they become efficient at that, they might be doing innovation without creating an effect,
Mm.
without creating outcome, because everything else is broken.
Yeah.
So I'm
It's so super important, and that's a lot of mistakes, or let's say a lot of different approaches are out there in the market. Yeah.
exactly. And I would say, I mean, people like to become, I don't want to say like to, so no one gets insulted, but people tend to be sometimes dogmatic about the approach. But really, whatever innovation approach you take, it will most likely give you better result than not doing anything. But it is really when you have this vertical integration, vertical slice, when you start creating your innovation system. And
Yeah.
in financial institutions, especially, as I told you before, they must follow their processes, procedures. So building systems is very important for them. And people often scratch their head, because when they encounter with innovation, they're like, oh, how will I systemize this? How will I write a procedure? Is that even possible?
Yeah.
Yes, the trick is not to put into procedure exact idea or business unit or department, but focus on the work itself. For example, you can have a procedure for, how do you write down an idea? Easy.
Yeah.
How do you then assess an idea? Again, don't build into your procedure exact measures, but build high level things like, idea must be aligned with business strategy document of the business unit. Idea should have clear proposer, name, surname. Idea should address what is it about. You just say that. You don't need to say how many words
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
how many sentences, how it should phrase. And now we start looking again. This is specific to financial institutions, because they need to put this in their documents eventually. Because when they have internal audits or external audits, someone is going to look at that. And then
Yeah.
someone will say, oh, you're innovating. Huh? Did you follow the things you said you would follow? Oh, no? Well, here's a fine, which is usually 7 figures and higher.
Yeah. Yeah. So setting up the, let's call it team, the
Mm,
group, that's the vertical slice. What is your role in this? So
mm,
the top management, or the management, is hiring you to support them to do
mm,
that. So that's now the theory part of it. So that's
mm,
the setup,
mm,
how you would approach that. How would you then guide them towards that
mm,
direction?
mm. I'm a practical guy. I like to think I'm a practical and pragmatic guy.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, remember, no alignment, no success. So let's start looking at everything you have. I'm pretty big on respecting what we have done. I think it's really silly to pretend that company just came out of thin air and let's create new strategy,
Yeah.
as nothing happened. Let's look at everything you have and let's create the innovation strategy. 3 pages. What's your innovation narrative? Hey, this is the objective. This is how it ties to our corporate objective. Bam, that's it, simple. Second page, avoidance policy. These are the things we will not fund. These are the opportunities we will not invest in. These are the business models we will not invest in. These are the technologies we will not invest in. Again, it doesn't have to be named as Bitcoin. It can be as we will not invest in technologies that are provided by vendors that exist only for 5 years or less.
Yeah.
That's a valid thing to say we will not invest in. And then third page of the innovation strategy, investment policy. The opposite, the yes list. These are the things we will invest in. It's the job of top management to come up with that. And that is what I would help them come up with. Because when we have that as a 3-page or 1-page document, that is something that is safe to share with the rest of the business unit. And then people can focus and direct their creativity into that direction, because they know what will get a thumbs up and what will get thumbs down. That's that. Now we have that document, and now we can actually start either collecting or filtering ideas. Filtering ideas is the easiest way to manage ideas. People like to prioritize ideas, and I often say it's a waste of time for the following reason. They will come up with 11 elements to measure, and then they will try to have this 11 criteria for every idea. And when you run a good ideation session or a good brainstorming session, you can walk away with 100 ideas or more. Are you going to now, for 100 ideas, evaluate 11 factors or something? Even 3 factors times 100 is 300. Forget about it. You just check it. Is it aligned with the idea? Is it on the no list? Throw it away. Is it on the yes list? Okay, let it go through. The thing is, people, especially in financial institutions, they're afraid that if they don't eat the whole cake, somebody else will eat it.
Yeah.
That doesn't work with innovation. If it's good, it will come back. Don't be afraid to say no. I mean, nothing happened. And people, your employees, will respect you more. So if you're able to say no within 7 to 14 days, no one is going to get insulted. They will even respect you more, and they will be happy to propose another idea. But if you never come back to them, forget about it.
Yeah. And it's also I mean, if you do this like you said, in that way, it's not that they spend 2 years developing an idea and then come and get a disapproval. It's like, idea stage, let's go in and figure out if it's going forward or not.
Exactly. So again, most of larger companies already have some sort of product life cycle or some sort of developing their products, services, etc. So again, just using that, there is usually something at the beginning of the process. So mapping that to the innovation strategy and filtering things as they go through. And then comes the meat on the front side of the innovation. So this all needs to happen so that innovation can actually flow through the organization.
Yeah.
And now we start coming to actually doing the thing, innovating. So my proposal, or what I prefer and experience as the best, is people proposing ideas should be the one at least initially starting. There needs to be some people on the team, but the trick is to provide weekly support. So they need to be doing something on week by week basis. And if management, be it middle management, top management, says, well, you have 20%, you're allowed to spend 20% of your time on this innovation project, what will mean is that they spend 100% doing their regular job and then add 20% on top.
Yeah.
That's bad. Don't be that guy. So tell them specifically, block off one whole day for this project. That's equal to 20%, but it's much different than when they try to put 1 or 2 hours every day.
Yeah.
With that in place, then as innovation manager, make sure that they have access to either a coach or someone internally to help them refine ideas. What I like to do is have very practical kickoff, where we don't work on fantastical ideas, but actual ideas they proposed. And then what's usually most difficult in innovation is testing testing business ideas. So usually the weekly support, what I most often do with my clients is meet with teams every week and help them every week design another experiment, learn and integrate, develop their idea. That's on the practice side, on the innovation execution. On the management and executives, it's about teaching them how to evaluate ideas. And the best way to do that is actually to coach them on their own ideas. Like, hey, people are now bringing back, this is what I did, this is what I learned, and this is what I propose should happen next. So the team proposes a decision, not the executive. And this switches the dynamic in such a powerful way, because then you really have independent and empowered employees that are thinking about success of this idea. They're not just thinking, I'm doing my thing, you funded it, but they know that they're coming to you, the big boss, and they're actually proposing. They have the power to say, I'm going to stop this or continue with this. And then you actually evaluate that. Okay, is this good enough evidence for me to continue funding this, or to release another tranche of funding? Yes, no. Again, that options theory. So they have an option to invest more. If they decide to stop it, this is another very important thing. So in corporate innovation, especially financial institutions, documenting the learning is very important, because if you decide not to invest in an idea, all that documented learning becomes reusable. So if you decided not to create that consumer loan for whatever reason, or not to introduce another credit card or whatever, you can reuse the learning on next approach. So I had a situation where a team was exploring specific mortgage line. And what they were doing is they were looking into why are people dropping off at certain moment. And then they started calling, investigating further, etc. And they can't go into too many details. They learned some specific things and they decided this idea isn't worth doing. But that learning became available to everybody in the organization. And when another team started working on mortgage, they could actually go and reuse that and basically bypass the whole development process, because the team did such a good job of documenting what the customer wants. But because that team was not focused on that, it didn't matter to them. But the new team, it was all they needed. And they could move fast, deploy the product relatively fast, and it entered their product portfolio. So that's a good example. And I know this was a high-level answer.
No, it's super good, because just double clicking on the last part is, I mean, I come from large organizations, and now we talk still about that vertical, but it's even more important when you further go into the wider, like, okay, now let's do this. It has worked. We got into it. Everyone else would like to do the new innovation thing as well. And then you widen it out through the whole organization. If you then don't document and don't learn from each other, you do double work, because people might not know that you have done that. And that's happening in all large organizations every day. You do the same mistakes others have done 2 years ago.
Exactly. And there was something you mentioned earlier on that I want to come back to, because it's related to this. You mentioned that companies make a mistake of trying to educate everybody. And another mistake that I've seen is that we often forget that adults learn in a bit different way. So we cannot use the same approach as we had in elementary school, high school, university, etc. And especially when we're talking on the job training, it's much superior than classroom training, education, etc. So if you have people that want to innovate in your organization, don't send them to some classes, even with me, although they might have good time, but it's much better to actually get them to write an idea and then get them to work on that idea in a workshop setting or whatever, so they get the feeling of the tools or whatever you might be using. That's so much more powerful, because then if they decide to continue, well, if they get the funding, they will get access to the coach, etc. You benefit. If they don't decide to continue, they have still worked on a real thing that's relevant to your organization, and they have developed real skills. So they can reuse that on another idea, a different part of the organization. That's so much more powerful than mandating, okay, now everybody goes to the classroom, watches these videos. No matter how much you gamify, your corporate training that you get smileys or whatever, it's still waste of time if people
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
actually use those skills.
Agree. Can't agree more. And that's it. It's so, I mean, I'm a practical guy as well, and we have similar background being engineers. Um, if you and that's how I learned it. I started on construction sites. If you do it yourself, then you know how it works. If you have never done it, if you just have read about it, then yeah, you know maybe more than someone who has not read about it, but you have no idea how to do it. And that's also what I've learned for myself. It works, at least. Like if I do things myself, then I will understand how it works, and then I can take it to the next level fairly quickly, rather than just working with the theory.
Mm-mm. And here, to connect to that, because we have similar background, and from time to time I get the question like, is innovation only for engineers, R&D people, specialists, etc.? My answer is absolutely not.
Yeah.
And what's important to remember, R&D is about turning money into ideas. Innovation is about turning ideas into money.
Yeah.
So you don't need to come up with patents or technological solutions or things like that. To me, innovation is about creating something new that creates value. New meaning to you as the company and your customers, not to the history of mankind, because we came up with a lot of things. And as we said earlier in this conversation, value is for the customer and for the recipient. And anyone listening, watching, whatever, anyone can innovate. Will it be successful or not? There is no guarantee.
Yeah.
But there is no special education or background that should prevent you from having the right and opportunity to bring an idea to life. And I think that that's an important reminder, especially to bigger companies, that sometimes they introduce specialist roles, and they might say someone in the company is like innovation engineer or innovator. It's a cool role, but it doesn't mean that they're special or that others aren't allowed
Yeah.
to innovate.
I think that's a very, very good point, because going back to what you said, is the system that's important, specifically in large organization. I mean, if you're a 5 people company, that's slightly different. But if you're a large organization, you have, most probably, if you're a very large organization, couple of silos. Even if everyone says no, we don't have silos, we work all together and we have verticals, whatever. Most probably you have somehow silos still, even if they're not on the org chart anymore. uh, and this system approach is so important to be successful. And then I agree with you, the innovation will happen if you allow it to happen. But it's building that system first and then empowering the people to innovate. Is a completely different way than empowering people to innovate and then not having the system. Then it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Super
and
important.
and if few short remarks, and you stop me if I start going
No,
too
good.
broad. So innovation system, completely agree with you. First thing, for everybody listening, innovation system isn't there for your superstars and rock stars. It's to increase the average. So the average Joe with innovation system will be will be performing much higher than without the system. So you're not really focusing, on those two guys that know CEO personally, that are trailblazers, that can, get any meeting. Forget about them. They will always make it work. Really, innovation system is about creating a space where everybody can raise up. And then the second one, people ask like, but how can I empower them? Well, very practically, as we talked earlier, give them power to propose a decision and then evaluate it. That's how you empower people. Lead by example, and that's it. Everybody does their jobs. Innovators innovate, managers manage, executives fund. That's your job. Lead by example. That's how you create empowered culture. Don't mystify it. It's not rocket science. You don't need PhD in culture to create culture. You just need to behave in specific way consistently.
Yeah,
Okay, maybe I oversimplified, but
yeah, I agree. I think that's sometimes helpful to remind people that the culture is the effect of that system. It comes automatically afterwards, so you don't need to work too hard to get that culture, because it's the outcome.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's interrelated. Everything influences the other.
yeah. Awesome. So what did we forget? We started from understanding that it's not the burning platform, went into the strategy filter, looked at the budgeting, looked at the business unit approach where we have a vertical slice, which is then getting the system set up. And then we looked into, for example, you mentioned the three pager, the narrative, the avoidance policy, the investment policy, and then you start with the operational level, which is collecting ideas and filtering them through the system. Of course, the testing and documentation. Is there anything we forgot?
It's not set in stone. So
Yeah.
what we shared is not beginning and an end. It's an infinite process.
Yes.
So when we look at big organizations like Toyota, so Toyota production system is legendary. Many approaches that are popular today are inspired by it, from agile to lean startup, etc. The thing is, what they were able to do consistently for more than 50 years is learn from themselves. That's everything you need. So this type of a system approach, if you're able to learn from yourself and retain that knowledge, is everything you need. So once this vertical slice is set up in a way that I propose or in some other way, the point is to expand it to the whole business unit, then add another business unit and continue. And in a few years, your whole organization is more innovative and more profitable. But it doesn't stop. You need to repeat that process, because 10 years from now, we will learn something new about human psychology, human motivation, innovation process. Technology will change. So you continue doing that. And what's important reminder for everybody is organizations don't learn, people do. If you're a 10,000 or 100,000 person organization and there's Jens and Bruno know something, not that organization. If other 99,999 people cannot access Jens or Bruno, then you cannot claim that the organization knows that. So it's important not to forget people matter the most. And I think that got a little bit lost in the last years. I'm all for mobility of employees and workforce, but it is upon the company to create an environment where people want to stay for 5, 10, 15 years, because our knowledge grows geometrically. So when you learn A, B, and C, it's not just A, B, C, it's A, B, A, C, and A, B, C. So all the interrelationships and everything. So the more your people know, an area of opportunity opens. So reinvesting continuously in systems that allow people to make decisions and learn from themselves, and then you keep them, like, you don't need to worry about your profitability.
I agree. And I think an important part of that system is as well, it's not about, hey, now we are looking only into this specific credit card, debit card, whatever thing. It's because the knowledge grows over time and the system grows over time. You have all parts of your business running with that system if you do it well. It might take a while, but in the end, it's getting there if you allow it to get there.
Exactly. And that approach allows you to actually reap the benefits of investing in innovation earlier. Because let's be real, if you're really talking about investing in something disruptive or radical, you're looking at 7 or more years before you get any returns.
Yeah.
And if you're able to start that basically BU by BU, you will start getting these results earlier. Especially because most often it happens that you first invest in incremental innovations. Nothing wrong with that. It's like developing innovation muscle. And you start getting these results earlier. Because as we said earlier in the call, you invest in innovation because you want to make a difference for yourself as a business and for your customers. And especially innovation strategy and everything that we talked, the more you learn, the more you innovate, the more you will change. It's not set in stone. It shouldn't be set in stone. Like if your innovation is the same for 5 years, something is probably wrong.
Yes. Love that. So let's get us towards the end. One question I always ask everyone on this show is, can you describe your dream customer or dream client?
Yeah, I can. So early in my career, when I moved from being an engineer, etc., to being independent expert and consultant, I said I want only one thing. I will work only with clients, people, etc., that want to make something different or that want to do something different. My life is too short to persuade someone, hey, you need to be more innovative or you need to do things better. So I said for myself, because I have that freedom as being independent, I will only work with client that is already trying something. So for example, when one client wanted to get me, they invited me, they showed me their environment. They said, hey, our teams, this is what they're doing, this is exactly what they're doing. And yes, they weren't perfect. They were doing things a little bit, I would say, wrong or loop-sided, but to me that was the evidence I needed. Like, these guys are getting it, they're trying hard
Yeah.
to do something differently. Therefore, it's worth spending time with them. And I stuck with that decision, and I haven't regretted it. Sometimes I have to say no, but that is part of sticking to your decision. Why did I say that? Is I'm an action guy. I love action. If I go into a company and I need to spend 2 years to convince you that something isn't right, oh my God, I don't want to spend my life that way. I want to go because you have seen that something is wrong, and then, we go hard at it and we make a difference.
Love
That's my
that.
ideal client.
Yeah, that's super good. So in case you see yourself, whoever one is listening to that or watching that, go to heitlandinnovation.com. I can even show the banner. Let's get it rolling. / innovation culture coding. There is the profile from Bruno, and you can click right through him, contact him, and ask him to work with you or help you if you fit into that category. Bruno, was a pleasure having you on the show. It's a real fun to listen to you. I've learned a lot. As always, thank you very much for being on the show, Bruno.
Jens, thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun, and I've seen you take a lot of notes, and you did
Yes.
an amazing job of connecting that in one story. So thank you for paying attention.
Yeah, there's a lot of training in that. Thank you.